Austin Kleon's Show Your Work begins with a liberating idea. You don't need to be a genius to succeed. You simply need to make yourself discoverable. The myth of the solitary genius, working in secret until they produce a masterpiece, is dismantled and replaced with a more democratic, empowering reality. Creativity becomes valuable not when it's hidden, but when it's shared. In an age where the world is connected by screens, platforms, and conversations, the people who gain traction are not necessarily the most talented or the most brilliant, but the most visible. Those who are willing to share their process, their progress, their small wins, and even their imperfect attempts. The internet no longer rewards only finished products, it rewards journeys. And the moment a creator decides to step into the open, everything changes. If this is your first time, subscribe so you don't miss out. Let's continue. This idea immediately leads to the deeper truth that your work grows in value the moment it becomes visible. Many people spend years waiting for the perfect moment to share their creativity, believing that they must refine every detail before presenting themselves to the world. But Kleon argues that this hesitation is far more dangerous than any criticism you might face. Obscurity, not imperfection, destroys more dreams. Recent years have proven this over and over again. Many of the creators who skyrocketed on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram did not rise through polished performances, but through behind-the-scenes clips, raw experiments, unfiltered attempts, and vulnerable storytelling. A painter in Lagos sharing daily sketches, a chef in New York showing meal prep, a photographer in Manila posting lighting tests. Their willingness to be visible transformed them. The world today doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. Once someone accepts that visibility is a creative superpower, a second lesson emerges naturally. Creativity thrives through consistency, not occasional brilliance. People connect most with what they encounter repeatedly. When creators show up regularly, even with small contributions, they build trust, familiarity, and emotional resonance. Think of a YouTuber who uploads weekly, a writer who posts daily notes, or a musician who shares rehearsal clips. Their work becomes part of the audience's routine, and familiarity evolves into loyalty. Algorithms reward consistency, but more importantly, humans reward it. As Austin Kleon emphasizes, creativity is not about single peaks of inspiration. It is about steady movement, sharing a little something every day so that the world always knows you're building, growing, and contributing. With consistency comes the realization that you don't need a grand masterpiece before you can show anything. Sharing fragments of your daily effort, sketches, draft sentences, prototypes, brainstorm notes, or even what you're currently learning, creates a living portfolio. It communicates that you are active, improving, curious, and committed. This is how many authors today build an audience long before publishing a book. James Clear, for example, shared short insights on habits for years before Atomic Habits debuted. By the time it launched, millions were already engaged with his work. Similarly, in Nigeria, entrepreneurs who build in public often attract investors not because they have completed products, but because they demonstrate progress. When you share pieces of your journey, people grow with you, and growth creates community, the foundation of opportunity. This leads directly to another important insight. Documentation is part of creativity itself. Many creators believe that sharing their process requires extra effort, but Kleon reframes it. Simply document what you are already doing. A fashion designer can photograph fabric selections. A software developer can share debugging notes. A writer can post a sentence they deleted but learned from. A digital artist can show an early sketch before adding color. Documentation becomes a quiet form of storytelling. In fact, some of the world's largest brands now rely heavily on behind-the-scenes documentation. Korean skincare companies show R&D labs to build trust. American coffee roasters share their sourcing process to build transparency. Tech founders share monthly updates to build credibility. People don't just want the final product, they want the story behind it, and documentation gives them access to that story. As documentation becomes a creative act, another lesson unfolds. Teaching is one of the most generous forms of visibility. Kleon emphasizes that teaching is not reserved for experts or gurus. Anyone who is even a single step ahead can teach what they've learned. A beginner coder can teach absolute beginners. A digital illustrator can explain how they choose colors. A student can share how they organize study notes. When you teach, you multiply your impact because your learning becomes someone else's shortcut. This democratizes value across borders. A Kenyan analyst teaching data visualization on YouTube might educate viewers in Canada. A Brazilian guitarist teaching chord progressions might inspire learners in Texas. A Nigerian fintech founder explaining startup mistakes might help entrepreneurs in Singapore. Teaching magnifies your influence and reinforces your expertise at the same time. Naturally, the act of teaching and sharing leads to a deeper emotional requirement: vulnerability. To show your work is to show your imperfections, your experiments, your half-formed thoughts, your early drafts, and your unclear attempts. Vulnerability is uncomfortable, but it is one of the strongest forces for connection. People relate not to perfection, but to humanity. When creators hide their struggles, they become distant and unrelatable. When they share them, they become inspiring. A comedian in the US documenting failed jokes on stage gains respect for honesty. A startup founder publicly describing a failed product builds trust with future investors. A visual artist sharing a ruined canvas reveals the emotional truth of creation. Vulnerability is powerful because it signals authenticity. And authenticity is magnetic. But vulnerability requires balance, which leads to another key lesson. You do not need to show everything, only what matters. Kleon warns that not every moment of your life must be public, and not every detail of your work must be shared. Boundaries protect your mental health, your relationships, your long-term projects, and your private joy. A creator can show the process without showing the entire formula. A business owner can share growth updates without sharing private financials. A writer can discuss themes without posting every chapter. This balance ensures that sharing feels empowering, not draining. It preserves the sacred inner space where creativity originates. With healthy boundaries in place, the next realization becomes clear. Curation is a form of creativity. Creators should not only share what they make, but also share what inspires them. Credit your influences. Name your teachers. Recommend the books, podcasts, videos, and thinkers that shaped your ideas. By doing this, you position yourself within a creative lineage. People trust those who openly acknowledge the shoulders they stand on. Globally, creators who share their influences attract audiences who share the same intellectual DNA. In the US, tech leaders often cite their reading lists publicly, making their thinking transparent. In Africa, artists highlight cultural and global influences, weaving them together. When you curate, you are not just showing your taste. You are building a world around your work that others can explore. All these lessons converge into a final message that reshapes how creators should see themselves. Sharing your work is not an act of self-promotion. It is an act of contribution. Many people avoid sharing because they fear looking boastful or self-centered. Kleon reframes it completely. When you share your process, your lessons, your growth, and your inspirations, you are giving people something useful. You are offering value. You are helping someone who may be struggling with the same challenges. A young designer showing how they improve their typography is helping beginners everywhere. A financial analyst breaking down data visualization steps is helping students globally. A painter demonstrating brush techniques is helping thousands who may never meet them. Sharing is not, "Look at me," but "Here's something that might help you." When a creator embraces this, sharing becomes a responsibility rather than a burden. If your journey, your insights, your failures, your progress, or your learning can help even one person, then keeping it hidden deprives the world of something meaningful. Creativity is not meant to be sealed away. It is meant to flow. And the more it flows, the more the creator grows alongside those who benefit from it. The entire philosophy of Show Your Work begins with this single premise and expands from it. Your work becomes powerful when it becomes visible, and visibility becomes powerful when it becomes generous. As the philosophy of sharing evolves, another truth becomes unavoidable. Once you begin to show your work, you inevitably connect with people who resonate with your voice, your process, and your worldview. These people form what Austin Kleon calls a scenius, a collective form of genius that emerges not from individual brilliance, but from a community of creative thinkers who influence one another. This idea reframes success as a collaborative achievement rather than a solitary conquest. In a world where creativity crosses borders in seconds, no one grows alone. When a designer in South Africa posts a new poster concept, a student in Detroit may remix the idea. When a poet in London shares a writing exercise, it may spark a spoken-word performance in Nairobi. Creativity ripples outward, and those ripples return in ways that expand the original contributor. This reinforces the idea that creators don't need millions of followers. They need the right people. People who care about their work, who understand their approach, and who appreciate the honesty of their process. In the United States, for example, countless niche creators have built entire careers by serving small, dedicated audiences. Indie musicians earning through Patreon, minimalist designers selling digital templates, or educators publishing paid newsletters. Globally, the same pattern appears. A cartoonist in India with 5,000 engaged readers can earn a living through direct support. A content creator in Ghana can build a profitable online course community without needing viral fame. The magic lies in attracting people who resonate with the authenticity you reveal. Showing your work is how you invite them into your orbit. As this audience forms, another lesson becomes apparent. You must learn to let your work speak for itself. Instead of aggressively self-promoting, you cultivate environments where your creations naturally attract attention. Think of how some photographers grow their following by consistently posting their edits, explaining their lighting setup, and offering tips. They don't shout, they demonstrate. Similarly, software engineers on GitHub gain recognition not because they ask for it, but because they openly publish useful tools, libraries, or scripts that others adopt. The work travels. The work recommends you. The work becomes your ambassador long before you appear in person. To allow work to speak effectively, creators must master the art of storytelling. This doesn't mean invented narratives, but simple explanations of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they're learning along the way. Humans connect with stories more than with static outcomes. A sculptor sharing the moment their clay collapsed is far more endearing and educational than a sculptor who posts only perfect statues. A founder describing the stress of debugging a system in the middle of the night is more relatable than a founder bragging about success. This emotional honesty enhances the story behind the work, and the story enhances the work itself. The next insight naturally follows. The internet rewards those who are able to sustain long-term creative momentum. It's not enough to show your work once and disappear. The creators who thrive build habits that allow them to keep contributing without burning out. They share in sustainable ways, small slices, manageable pieces, honest updates. Burnout often comes from overexertion or unrealistic expectations, not from sharing itself. Someone who posts a daily sketch for 10 minutes can maintain that rhythm far longer than someone who spends days producing a polished masterpiece for every post. This principle is visible across countless creative fields. Many successful YouTubers today began not with cinematic productions, but with simple videos shot on phones, posted regularly. Over time, their quality naturally improved as their audience grew. Sharing small and often is better than sharing big and rarely. This rhythm creates an upward spiral. As you share more, you learn more. As you learn more, you have more to share. This continuous cycle of creation and reflection gradually shapes both your craft and your identity. And this identity becomes amplified by the next core idea. Generosity isn't just a moral stance. It is a creative strategy. Giving credit, offering insights, recommending resources, highlighting others' work. These actions elevate not only the people you support, but also your own position within the creative ecosystem. Generosity signals confidence. It shows you don't fear competition because you understand that creativity is not a finite resource. When an American author shares their research sources, or when a Nigerian illustrator recommends other artists they admire, they become more trusted voices in their fields. People gravitate to those who lift others up. But generosity also requires discernment. Creators must avoid becoming overwhelmed by the noise of the digital world, where constant communication and social comparison can poison the creative mind. This leads to another crucial lesson. Attention is your scarcest resource. You cannot create if you are overwhelmed by distraction. You cannot share meaningfully if your mental space is cluttered. Kleon urges creators to cultivate quiet, protected pockets of time where creativity can flourish without interruption. This discipline becomes especially important in a globalized world where people across continents live in cycles of endless notifications, group chats, breaking news, and algorithmic feeds. The creators who rise above the noise are those who carve out intentional spaces for deep thinking. A composer might silence devices for an hour each morning. A student might block off a study window daily. A founder might schedule uninterrupted problem-solving sessions. Protecting attention is how excellence survives in a distracting world. When attention becomes fortified, creators gain the clarity to shape their digital presence intentionally rather than impulsively. They learn to craft what Kleon calls a daily dispatch, a small, thoughtful contribution drawn from what they are already doing. It might be a photograph of a sketch, a paragraph from a rough draft, or a snippet of code from a project. This not only keeps them visible, but reinforces their creative identity. Over time, these daily contributions accumulate into a compelling public archive, a living museum of progress. Think of popular creators today whose early content remains online. You can scroll back and see the improvement year by year. That visible evolution becomes part of their story, part of their value. And as the archive grows, another powerful realization emerges. Everything you share becomes an invitation. It invites conversation, collaboration, curiosity, and connection. A musician sharing a melody might inspire a producer to collaborate. A researcher sharing a thought might spark academic dialogue. A baker sharing failures might create a community of learners. Collaboration often begins with a simple act of openness. This global interconnectedness has led to remarkable partnerships across continents. A beatmaker in Atlanta collaborating with a vocalist in South Korea, a startup founder in Kenya partnering with a UI designer in Canada, or a painter in Spain receiving commissions from collectors in the US because of a simple post. None of these collaborations would have existed if the creators kept their work hidden. As these connections multiply, creators eventually confront a deeper emotional challenge. Not everyone will like or understand your work. Critics, trolls, and skeptics are unavoidable. But Kleon reminds us that criticism is not a signal to stop. It is proof that your work has reached far enough to encounter dissent. The real danger is indifference, not criticism. The more authentic and visible you become, the more polarized the responses may be. But visibility requires courage. Content creators across the United States have learned to ignore malicious comments while valuing constructive critique. Writers across Asia have embraced negative reviews as signs of relevance. Musicians in Africa have learned that critics often appear when their music reaches wider audiences. The key is discernment, knowing which voices deserve attention and which deserve silence. This discernment paves the way for one of the most grounding lessons in the entire philosophy. Stay rooted in your own identity, not in external validation. Every creator faces moments of self-doubt, especially in a world driven by likes, shares, and metrics. But long-term creative fulfillment comes from alignment, doing work that reflects your true interests, values, and curiosity. The joy of showing your work is not in chasing applause, but in participating in a global creative conversation. It is about contributing something meaningful, however small, to the world's collective creativity. All these principles weave together into a unified message. Creativity thrives through openness, visibility, generosity, consistency, and courage. The more you share, the more opportunities you generate, not only for others, but also for yourself. And as this cycle continues, creators discover that showing their work is not just a strategy for success, but a philosophy for living, a commitment to growth, connection, and contribution. When you open your creative process to the world, you invite others not just to witness your evolution, but to participate in it. The more people share generously, the more they also begin to attract opportunities that align with their unique path. Because showing one's work is really an act of signaling one's values, interests, and capabilities to the world. This signaling principle has become even more powerful in a digital age defined by discoverability. You do not need to be famous, you only need to be findable. And becoming findable is a consequence of building a public trail of ideas, experiments, insights, and contributions that allow others to understand not just what you do, but how your mind works. This shift, from pursuing attention to earning trust through shared thinking, explains why many emerging creators achieve success long before they have large audiences. They win because they start early, act consistently, and prioritize authenticity over polish. As this pattern repeats, it naturally builds momentum. Each contribution creates another entry point through which someone can discover your work. That is why Austin Kleon encourages creatives to share even the seemingly mundane parts of their process. The unpolished truth of daily effort is often more magnetic than the flawless illusion of perfection. People relate more deeply to progress than they do to polish. Consider how the maker movement or YouTube's vast DIY ecosystem grew. Millions of ordinary individuals simply recorded themselves trying things, explaining what they learned, and showing their transformations. Today, many of them are viewed as experts, though most began as curious learners who were brave enough to share their imperfect journeys. The lesson extends across fields and cultures. Entrepreneurs who share prototypes and testing results early often generate user communities that help refine the final product. Educators who document their teaching methods attract collaborations. Fitness trainers who reveal their own struggles and routines build trust that no glossy advertisement could ever produce. Even in scientific research, open data movements are accelerating global discoveries by enabling researchers to benefit from each other's findings. The consistent thread is that visibility, vulnerability, and value creation work together as a synergistic triad. This leads naturally to a deeper truth. The best way to build a sustainable creative career is to focus on contribution rather than competition. When you see others doing great work, the instinct to compare yourself diminishes because you now view them as potential collaborators or sources of inspiration rather than threats. This shift in mindset promotes longevity because comparison drains energy while contribution expands it. Many Americans found this shift essential during the rise of remote work in 2020 and beyond. Collaboration online became the backbone of innovation when physical proximity disappeared. Professionals who shared insights online grew faster in influence than those who remained silent, because they offered value to a global audience hungry for knowledge, clarity, and community. In sharing your work publicly, you gradually build what Austin Kleon calls a scenius, a collective form of genius formed by communities of like-minded creators. No one succeeds alone. Every breakthrough is the result of participation in a wider ecosystem of thinkers, problem solvers, mentors, and supporters. This understanding becomes liberating because it removes the impossible burden of trying to achieve everything individually. Instead, you focus on showing up consistently, contributing honestly, and participating meaningfully in the networks that relate to your interests. Over time, you grow not just as a creator, but as a node in a larger, mutually beneficial system. What strengthens this system is the mindset of generosity. When you help others amplify their work, you are not dimming your own light. You are increasing the brightness of the entire environment in which you also live. History is filled with creative clusters that emerged from this principle. Silicon Valley startups sharing early coding solutions, New York's literary circles exchanging drafts, Lego's blossoming tech hubs where young founders openly share product building lessons, South Korea's animation and gaming communities trading skills. These groups flourished because they saw creation not as a zero-sum game, but as an expanding universe of shared possibility. Generosity also builds goodwill, and goodwill builds resilience. When challenges arise, as they always do, the relationships you formed through your contributions become a support system that carries you forward. This was evident across global industries during difficult economic shifts, where individuals who had long nurtured their communities received unexpected opportunities, collaborations, or audience-driven support during downturns. Their prior consistency built reservoirs of trust that later became lifelines. As the creative journey evolves, another essential lesson emerges. You must maintain the discipline of staying visible without losing yourself in the pursuit of visibility. The difference is subtle but profound. Sharing your work should remain an act of expression, not a desperate chase for validation. When you stay grounded in the purpose of your work, your sharing becomes sustainable. You no longer feel pressured to produce viral material. Instead, you focus on telling honest stories, offering useful insights, and staying connected to the curiosity that started everything. Real audiences gravitate to consistency and sincerity, not theatrics. This mindset allows creators to maintain steady long-term growth. You become someone whose ideas are trusted because you have built a track record of thinking aloud, learning publicly, and contributing meaningfully. Trust, once established, becomes a priceless currency. It shapes your reputation, influences your opportunities, and determines the longevity of your creative impact. For instance, American author James Clear spent nearly a decade sharing small insights on habits before publishing Atomic Habits, which later reshaped global conversations on behavior change. His book did not succeed because of marketing hype, but because millions had already come to trust the clarity and quality of his earlier contributions. The beauty of showing your work is that it turns the world into your collaborator. The more you reveal, the more you learn, not just from your own reflections, but from the feedback and interpretations of others. Each time you expose your ideas to the world, you sharpen them. Each time you document your process, you deepen your understanding. Each time someone responds, questions, improves, or challenges your thinking, you grow in ways you never could have alone. This continual exchange creates the compounding effect that ultimately accelerates mastery. The final message embedded in Austin Kleon's philosophy is perhaps the most empowering. You do not have to wait for permission to begin. Start now, with what you have, and where you are. Every expert began as an amateur. Every recognized talent was once unknown. Every successful creator once released their first imperfect piece of work to an indifferent world. What separated those who succeeded from those who remained hidden was not intelligence, resources, or luck, but courage. The courage to show their work even when no one was watching. You become discoverable by being visible. You become respected by being consistent. You become influential by being valuable. You become unforgettable by being authentic. And through this steady unfolding, your work becomes more than a set of skills. It becomes an evolving story that others want to follow, learn from, and support. That is the essence of showing your work. Not a marketing strategy, but a human strategy, grounded in connection, contribution, and courage. If this message resonated with you, subscribe and join us for more wisdom that fuels growth.